True crime, American world's most evil prisoners. Evil behind concrete walls. They are the names whispered in prison corridors. Men so feared, their mere presence changes the air in a room. Behind America's thickest concrete and strongest steel, live prisoners whose crimes rewrote the limits of human evil, and whose punishment defines the edge of civilization. The gates of no return. There are prisons, and then there are fortresses built for nightmares. ADX Florence in Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, stands at the top of that list. It's where the government buries the living, terrorists, cartel leaders, serial killers, and traitors to the state. Opened in 1994, the federal Supermax was engineered to contain men who could not be trusted in any other place on Earth. Each inmate lives alone in a 7 by 12-foot cell built from poured concrete, sealed behind remote-controlled steel doors. There's no contact with guards, no sound of voices, only the hum of ventilation and the occasional echo of footsteps. Even sunlight arrives diluted, a narrow beam through a slit too small to see the sky. According to Bureau of Prisons records, the average ADX inmate spends 23 hours per day in isolation. Meals, showers, and recreation all happen within the same few square meters. For some, the silence becomes a second sentence, one the body survives, but the mind does not. Among these walls are men whose crimes changed nations. Their stories are not for sensation, but for understanding how ordinary humans descend into extraordinary darkness. The architect of fear. One such man was Ted Kaczynski, the so-called Unabomber. For nearly 2 decades, from 1978 to 1995, Kaczynski waged a one-man war against modern society, sending mail bombs to scientists, universities, and airlines. His attacks killed 3 and injured 23, spreading paranoia across the country. Court filings from United States versus Kaczynski reveal a brilliant but broken mind, a Harvard graduate turned hermit, living in a cabin with no electricity, convinced that technology was destroying humanity. When the FBI finally caught him in Montana, they found hundreds of pages of handwritten journals, diagrams, and bomb parts, a manifesto of vengeance disguised as philosophy. At ADX, Kaczynski was kept under constant surveillance, labeled a high communication risk. According to Bureau of Prisons reports, he was not permitted media contact for years, his mail monitored and censored. He lived and died in near total silence, a warning of what happens when intellect turns inward and empathy dies. The cartel ghost. Not far from Kaczynski's cell was another symbol of power and terror, Joaquín, El Chapo Guzmán, the infamous leader of Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. His empire spanned continents, moving billions of dollars in cocaine and heroin across U.S. borders. When he arrived at ADX in 2019, following extradition and conviction in federal court, even veteran officers described a sense of unease. Security was rewritten for him, one prison staff member told the New York Times. El Chapo was held in a reinforced unit known as H-Unit, designed to prevent communication with the outside world. His food was delivered through a slot. His exercise yard was a single concrete pit with a high ceiling and no sky. Court transcripts show that his requests for increased visitation were repeatedly denied. Authorities feared that even a few whispered words could reignite cartel operations. For a man who once commanded armies, the silence was the purest form of control. The master manipulator. Then there's Larry Hoover, founder of the Gangster Disciples, one of America's most organized street gangs. Born on Chicago's South Side, Hoover started as a small-time hustler in the 1960s. By the 1980s, his influence reached beyond state lines, orchestrating violence, extortion, and drug trade from prison. According to the Department of Justice's 1997 indictment, Hoover ran operations using coded messages disguised as legal correspondence and religious paperwork. The enterprise generated millions in drug profits, all from within a cell at Illinois' Stateville Correctional Center. His leadership, investigators said, turned a local gang into a nationwide criminal syndicate. In 1997, Hoover was transferred to ADX Florence. Federal prosecutors described the move as removing the brain from the body. Yet even in isolation, his legend persisted, whispered in Chicago neighborhoods, mythologized in music, and debated in activist circles. To some, he became a symbol of systemic failure, to others, proof that power corrupts absolutely. The cold messenger. Few prisoners have generated as much quiet dread as Robert Hanssen, the former FBI agent turned Russian spy. According to the Justice Department, Hanssen sold classified U.S. secrets to Moscow for over 20 years, a betrayal that compromised American agents and cost lives. His case remains one of the most damaging intelligence breaches in U.S. history. When he was sentenced to life at ADX in 2002, federal officials described him as the most dangerous traitor in American history. In the quiet of his solitary cell, Hanssen reportedly spent hours writing religious notes and reading theology. The irony was bitter: the men who traded his country's secrets for cash and validation, now living without a single voice to speak to. The terror within. Perhaps no inmate symbolizes pure, ideological violence more than Ramzi Yousef, the architect of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. His truck bomb killed 6 and injured over 1,000 people, a precursor to the terror that would later define a generation. Captured in Pakistan in 1995, Yousef showed no remorse during his trial. He told the court, "You keep calling us terrorists, but you are the ones who terrorize us." His cell at ADX is identical to others: window slit, steel sink, and concrete bed, but his isolation is total. According to the Bureau of Prisons Special Housing Regulations, inmates in his category receive no communal contact, no group prayers, and no access to live news. Their world is measured in footsteps and seconds. Prison psychologists have long debated whether such isolation constitutes punishment or destruction. For some, like Yousef, it becomes both. The weight of silence. ADX Florence is home to around 350 inmates, but silence makes it feel like less. There are no riots here, no shouted arguments, no echo of community, just an engineered quiet that stretches across steel doors and electric locks. A 2014 Amnesty International report called conditions at the facility inhumane, citing the psychological toll of long-term isolation. Former wardens, however, argue that it's necessary, the only way to prevent chaos among men who thrive on manipulation and violence. Both may be right. For the guards, each day is a test of discipline; for the prisoners, a lifetime of reflection in the world's most secure box. One ex-officer described it best. In most prisons, the walls hold people in. In this one, they hold the world out. The human paradox. Inside ADX, evil does not look like a monster. It looks ordinary: aging men in gray sweats, moving slowly down concrete corridors. Some read the Bible, others stare at the walls. Many were once leaders, masterminds, or soldiers of causes long forgotten. Now, they share the same reality: endless time and a locked door that never opens. The truth about America's most evil prisoners is that they are as human as they are horrific. Their crimes defy morality, but their existence reveals the cost of trying to contain darkness, not with fire, but with silence. Psychology of darkness, inside the minds of the unredeemable. What makes a person cross the invisible line between sanity and evil? Are they born that way, or built by the world around them? Behind every headline-making killer and notorious inmate lies a mind shaped by fear, obsession, and the slow corrosion of empathy. The anatomy of a predator. According to FBI Behavioral Science Unit archives, most violent offenders share 3 early traits: childhood abuse, social isolation, and escalating risk-taking. In prisons like ADX Florence and Marion, psychologists have spent decades studying these patterns. Their goal isn't sympathy, it's understanding. Clinical reports from the Bureau of Prisons describe inmates whose emotional wiring was damaged long before their crimes began. Some learned violence as a language. Others sought power to replace the control they never had. By adulthood, empathy had eroded, leaving only the logic of dominance: hurt before being hurt. Dr. Stanton Samno, a leading forensic psychologist who interviewed dozens of life sentence inmates, summarized it simply: they think differently. Where most people feel guilt, they feel strategy. That difference, not madness, but distortion, defines what many call evil. Ted Kaczynski, the intellectual isolationist. Few cases illustrate this better than Ted Kaczynski's. Court evaluations reveal that his intelligence was never in doubt, his alienation was. From Harvard classrooms to a one-room cabin in Montana, he drifted further from society's moral anchor. His writings show meticulous reasoning, yet complete emotional detachment. In psychological terms, he displayed cognitive empathy without effective empathy, the ability to understand pain, but not to feel it. That gap allowed him to justify cruelty as logic. In his world, bombs were arguments, and victims were footnotes. Inside ADX, mental health records, referenced in a 2012 Bureau of Prisons review, noted that Kaczynski maintained polite conversation but avoided therapy. He saw psychologists as part of the system he despised. To the end, he believed isolation proved his superiority, unaware it was confirming his pathology. El Chapo Guzmán, the narcissist kingpin. Joaquín Guzmán represents a different species of darkness, the narcissistic manipulator. According to U.S. District Court testimony from 2019, he viewed loyalty as currency and betrayal as death. Psychological profiling by federal analysts labeled him pathologically self-referential. His charisma created obedience, his cruelty, fear. In the criminal hierarchy, those qualities are often inseparable. He built trust by rewarding devotion, then destroyed it to maintain terror. At ADX, deprived of followers and luxury, his ego met its first true cage. Officers described pacing, talking to walls, an emperor trapped without an audience. Experts note that such confinement often breaks narcissists faster than violence does. They cannot stand being forgotten. Larry Hoover, the philosopher of power. For Larry Hoover, psychology mixed with ideology. Transcripts from his court-ordered evaluations paint a man who redefined crime as governance. He spoke of structure, discipline, and economic control, words that masked domination behind order. Psychologists studying Hoover's influence coined the term institutional charisma, the ability to inspire through systems, not charm. It's a trait shared by cult leaders and political tyrants alike, a belief that control equals salvation. In isolation, stripped of audience and command, such figures often disintegrate. Without power to project, they face the one enemy they cannot command, themselves. Robert Hanssen, the cold betrayer. When FBI counterintelligence officers confronted Robert Hanssen in 2001, he reportedly said, "What took you so long?" That arrogance, noted in court transcripts, reveals the psyche of the intellectual sociopath. Psychiatric profiles describe him as emotionally sterile, a man who found thrill not in ideology, but in superiority. Spying for Russia wasn't political, it was personal proof that he was smarter than everyone else. He valued recognition above allegiance, intellect above morality. Inside ADX, guards say he read theology obsessively, perhaps searching for absolution through abstraction. But faith without remorse is only ritual. Hanssen's mind, like his crimes, was built on control, even of God. Ramzi Yousef, the ideologue. Ramzi Yousef's psyche belongs to the realm of ideological fanaticism. Court psychiatrists documented unwavering conviction and near-total absence of guilt. To him, violence was not evil, it was obedience to a higher logic. That mindset, experts warn, is the most unbreakable. When a killer believes his actions serve destiny, remorse cannot take root. Even decades in isolation seldom change that belief, the echo of purpose replaces the need for compassion. In interviews with counter-terror specialists, one psychologist said, "Fanatics don't see murder. They see mission." It's why Supermax facilities remain necessary, not for punishment alone, but containment of contagion. Ideas, after all, can travel through walls. The neuroscience of evil. Modern brain imaging has revealed unsettling data. Studies by the National Institute of Mental Health show that psychopathic offenders often have reduced activity in the amygdala and ventromedial prefrontal cortex, regions linked to empathy and moral reasoning. They literally feel less. But genetics isn't destiny. Social environment, childhood trauma, and learned behavior amplify or suppress those predispositions. In that sense, evil isn't born, it's engineered over time through neglect, pain, and opportunity. Dr. Kent Keel, who scanned the brains of more than 500 inmates, described it as a spectrum of moral blindness. Most prisoners, he found, are not monsters, just broken people. The few who truly fit the term evil are those who feel nothing at all. Inside the mind cage. Supermax confinement magnifies that emptiness. Clinical observations from ADX and Marion reveal classic symptoms: hallucinations, self-talk, memory loss, depression. When the mind has no external world to map, it starts mapping itself. For some, that leads to repentance. For others, it becomes another battlefield, a war between guilt and denial. Psychologists who work these units describe walking a fine line between empathy and survival. They must engage the unengageable, seeking fragments of humanity in men defined by inhuman acts. Sometimes they find it, a question, a tear, a single word of regret. Other times, nothing. Just silence. The mirror of society. Understanding these prisoners isn't just an academic exercise, it's a mirror. Each of them reflects a fracture in the society that produced them: economic desperation, ideological extremism, or technological alienation. When we call them monsters, we distance ourselves. But when we study them, we confront how human capacity for harm truly works. Evil, it seems, is not supernatural. It's painfully human, a choice repeated until it becomes identity. Supermax, life, death, and the price of containment. No screams. No sunlight. No second chances. Inside America's Supermax prisons, the punishment isn't death, it's being erased while still breathing. This is the hidden world where silence replaces sound, and time itself becomes a weapon. The architecture of isolation. ADX Florence, Colorado. At first glance, it looks like any federal compound: fences, towers, guard shacks. But beneath the surface lies a design engineered not to rehabilitate, but to neutralize. The blueprints, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests and verified by Bureau of Prisons records, reveal a layered structure: concrete pods within pods, each self-contained and electronically sealed. Cells are built from reinforced concrete with immovable furniture, bed, desk, stool, all fused to the floor. Windows measure only 4 inches wide, angled upward so inmates see nothing of the outside world except a slice of sky. Even the recreation yards are cages, small concrete enclosures called dog runs, where prisoners spend 1 hour a day pacing in solitude. A former warden once described it bluntly to 60 Minutes. It's not designed for living. It's designed for surviving. Daily life in permanent lockdown. Every movement follows a script. At 6 a.m., fluorescent lights snap on automatically. Breakfast arrives through a narrow slot, a tray of scrambled eggs, oatmeal, or powdered milk. The slot closes, silence returns. Inmates shower inside their cells using timed faucets. Mail is photocopied, every sentence scanned. Conversations with staff happen through reinforced glass. According to Bureau of Prisons Policy 5700.08, prisoners in the control unit average 23 hours a day locked down, 1 hour for isolated exercise, 5 showers a week, and no physical contact with any other human being. Even visits from lawyers or family occur through video monitors. For guards, the routine is equally rigid: 2 officer escorts, constant radio check-ins, body armor at all times. 1 lapse can cost lives. These men and women work among the most dangerous individuals on earth, without ever touching them. The psychological fallout. Human minds are not built for sensory deprivation. Clinical reviews conducted by Dr. Craig Haney of the University of California found that more than half of long-term isolated inmates experience severe anxiety, paranoia, or hallucinations. Some begin talking to their reflections, others hear voices through the air vents. In 2015, a former ADX inmate filed a federal lawsuit describing a prison designed to drive men insane. The court documents cite inmates smearing walls with blood, screaming for hours, or begging for psychiatric care. While the Bureau of Prisons disputed exaggeration, it did acknowledge mental health vulnerabilities in extreme custody settings. A retired corrections officer quoted by the Denver Post said, "You watch men disappear in front of you, not physically, but mentally. They stop being here." Yet for some, that disappearance is the very point, the state's ultimate form of control without execution. The death inside. Not all inmates survive ADX. Since its opening, multiple suicides and medical deaths have been recorded, often linked to untreated psychological decline. Official records confirm that between 1994 and 2022, at least a dozen men took their own lives within its walls, including several under suicide watch. The most haunting stories never reach headlines. An anonymous staff report leaked in 2018 described an inmate who stopped speaking entirely. He lay motionless for days, refusing food, until his body gave out. He was found clutching a letter addressed to no one. To the administration, it was natural causes. To the guards who zipped the body bag, it was something else, proof that a man can die long before his heart stops. Moral dilemmas behind the bars. Critics call Supermax confinement a human rights violation, supporters call it a necessary shield. Both arguments hold weight. The inmates of ADX include terrorists who plotted mass murder, gang leaders who ordered killings from inside lesser prisons, and spies who sold secrets for cash. Their capacity for harm is proven. But can society protect itself without destroying what makes it humane? In a 2014 congressional hearing, former ADX warden Robert Hood testified, "We are trying to manage evil without becoming part of it. That paradox defines every corridor. To maintain safety, officers must strip inmates of connection. To maintain humanity, they must still see them as men, not monsters. The cost to those who guard them. Supermax doesn't only confine prisoners, it consumes its keepers." A 2019 Federal Bureau of Prisons occupational stress study revealed alarming rates of PTSD, depression, and early retirement among ADX staff. Many describe constant hypervigilance, scanning every movement, every sound. Some say they hear the electric locks clicking in their sleep. One officer told The Guardian, "We build cages for them, but the job builds one around us too." Flickers of redemption. In recent years, reform advocates have pushed for change. The Restrictive Housing Reform Act introduced to Congress in 2022 calls for limits on long-term solitary confinement and increased mental health oversight. The Bureau of Prisons has slowly expanded step-down programs, gradual reintegration units where inmates earn social privileges through discipline and therapy. A handful of men have made it out of ADX into lower security prisons after years of compliance. For them, seeing another human face without glass between them felt like rebirth. One wrote in a monitored letter later released by his attorney. "After 12 years alone, hearing someone laugh was the loudest sound in the world." The price of safety. America spends millions annually to keep roughly 350 men in ADX Florence. Each costs taxpayers more than $90,000 a year, double the average federal inmate. Supporters argue that cost is justified by security. Critics say it's moral bankruptcy with a receipt. Whichever side you take, the result is the same, a society paying to preserve safety by perfecting isolation. Supermax prisons are not monuments of justice, they're mirrors reflecting what justice becomes when fear dictates design. As one legal scholar told PBS Frontline, "The question isn't whether these men deserve mercy. It's whether we deserve the kind of world that never gives it." The sound of nothing. Every night, as lights dim and the facility locks into electronic silence, 350 doors close in unison. No applause. No shouting. Just the hum of generators under the Rockies. For the men inside, each day ends the same way it begins, with nothing. No sky to mark time, no voice to answer back. This is America's invisible punishment. Not death by violence, but death by forgetting.